So yeah, we are in the Dominican Republic right now. Thank you everyone for coming. Today is a topic about the second and the third step. And the first thing that I want to say is that the first step of pranic breathing, just as well as breatharianism, is rather aimed at relaxation of the muscles as well as balancing in general and cleansing of the body. The first step has very concrete objective measurements, so to say, so we can calculate with numbers and say what is wrong, where is the mistake done, or if something is correctly. On the second step, we don't have this kind of objective criteria. We can say on the first step, if we compare the numbers with sensation, we can tell which actions are going in the right direction and which not. This knowledge is very important for the second step. So Olga will repeat herself once again what she already taught. We need to open the energetical channels which start from the nose. When these open and begin to work, our need in physical oxygen will become less and less. And in any kind of teaching, in any kind of system, it is understood. But since these channels are very complicated to be opened, people are suggested many other kinds of implementation, kinds of practices that tend to or are promising to help to open these channels. In the first place, number one is of course visualization. Secondly, people start to practice breathing. The trap here is, so to say, that people who start to practice with breathing, their attention is still directed at oxygen, at the physiological part. An example, when Olga was in India, one very well-known master taught his pupils pranayama, and he said to them, drink the air with your nose. And he showed to them how to do it. He made it like this. And his pupils repeated it. So when the channels are opening, really opening, without visualizations, without ideas, a certain sensation as if something flows from the nose down appears. In ancient traditions it is written, drink the air with your nose. And this sentence is absolutely correct. What is shown to the pupils as a practice is deep inhalation. This has nothing to do with the essence. So one sign that tells us that this is correct execution of the pranic breathing is that the ribs, the chest, the belly stops its motion when we are breathing. So the only criteria that we can tell objectively concerning this practice is that our inhalation is so little that simply nothing moves. For example, Victor Troviano. After 7 dry years, this process began to work naturally for him. So after 7 years, his physical body became balanced, aggressions went away and emotions became balanced, psyche got balanced, and these channels opened naturally. A friend of Olga has super physical abilities. He can levitate, he can move objects, perform lots of siddhas, and he has the same. His channels are open. Olga developed a technique that is aimed at the opening of these channels after or during 4 days. The body needs just the same way certain amount of time in order to readapt to this new way, to this new constitution of breathing. So in the beginning, of course, we use some practice, a technique, but after some time, first of all, the Ida and Pingala channels, which are also known as the solar and lunar channels, become cleansed. But after they switch on, of course, they bring everything else in balance as well. And after this, let's say a start-up of the process begins. In other words, we get used to this, the body has readapted, and this way of breathing becomes natural for us, and we don't need big amounts of breathing. So a certain amount of air still remains. It's rather a diffusion as a real inhalation. In other words, if we, in this condition, if we would dive underwater, yes, after a certain amount of time we would need another portion of oxygen. But at this moment there is very important information that Olga tries to bring to people on her webinars, seminars, on the videos. You have to become the researcher, the follower, the hearer of the process instead of the maker. We have many ideas, ideas about how it is when we feel good. I need to go gain weight, for example. I need more strength, for example. I need to stop my breathing. I need certain siddhas or superphysical abilities, go through walls, for example. So all of it is real, and yes, it exists. But because we have lots of distortions and distractions, we don't perceive it. It's not expressed in our consciousness. And when the energetical structure regenerates, we naturally begin to feel the etherical body. Very interesting to observe for Olga, right now here in Dominican Republic as we practice here. The people here feel the etherical bodies especially good under the water. I can say is holding her breath for a very long time. When Olga asks if she perceives tension under the water when she is holding her breath, said no, she simply relaxes and finds it very comfortable. And just the same results we need to achieve not only in the water, because in the water our perception is of course sharpened. We need to achieve this in our daily life and even during sleep. So when the process starts, the body begins to readapt, to reconstruct itself. It will deal in the first place with the most acute problems at the given moment. Those can be micro movements which we are not able to perceive with our consciousness, with our awareness, because we are not used to them. But when this happens, you will find a completely different satisfaction in your life. So this is a state when a person wants to return home. And basically all the people who begin to implement spiritual practices, they are seeking this sensation, this feeling of returning home. When this begins to work by itself, you understand that you are not torn apart from your nature, from your home. To force this experience, this process is completely useless. The second and the third step, Olga gives them together, not in order to have the job done quicker, but in order to make the one common with the whole picture. And so he or she understands which steps lie ahead and what he or she needs to do now or then. So basically it's like we widen our possibilities. In any way, after this or together with this, the one will have to work with his actual or acute moment right now. So he will have to return to his own situations. And these processes are so deep that this is the only thing that you can take with you in the condition or in the constitution after death. So we are speaking here about the fact that we cannot take anything with us that is from the physical plane with us when we go from this. So when we die here, we cannot take anything into the death or in life, in the afterlife, from the physical level, from the physical world. But this process, it is out of time. And Olga liked a lot the conversation that she had here. There is a practitioner here in Dominican Republic as well, and Olga was speaking with him about his experience. He was practicing some time, and then he left the practice for a year. And when he started to practice here again in Dominican Republic, he started at the same moment where he stopped a year ago. And this is very logical. And from this point of view, it becomes very clear what was done correctly in the practice. For example, someone was practicing for 20, 30 years some kind of practice. And when this one then begin to breathe, to learn how to breathe correctly, then he will start to learn from the beginning. Because this 20, 30 years, all of his practices, they didn't start the process, the real process. So Olga always uses the word process. Olga uses a lot the word process, and she wants to ask you now, how do you understand this word? Ongoing change. Yes, this is very accurate. But it is also a sharpened perception, sharpened awareness of more finer structures, more sensitive structures. And its resonance. There is such a sentence in Olga's seminars. The body of light can be grown, strengthened, or practiced. The body of light already exists. How do you want to create something that created you? Everything that we need is to see, to hear, and to feel. The problem is that our attention runs in circles in the already known. So that's why when your attention really merges or goes to the level of attention of consciousness, and when it merges with this consciousness, your physical body will resonate immediately, and realization will start immediately as well. But since we cannot direct our attention there, all traditions suggest their own practices. And Olga's tradition also suggests its own practices. The only difference is that Olga knows exactly where the direction has to be pointed at. And this makes Olga so special. A big authority for Olga is another teacher. The teacher is Padmasambhava. Olga mentioned this name already. And Padmasambhava realized the body of light. And he had many students who also realized it. And on the physical layer, he was existing for more than 1,000 years. But when he went away, he said that he is going to another dimension because there his knowledge, this knowledge is needed as well. So Padmasambhava was using in his practices Par-lung. Par-lung is a Tibetan word that consists out of two other words. Par means between and lung means energy. So this is another type of energy, a third type of energy. It shows itself, this third kind of energy shows itself when these two opposite energies are united, so the upstream and downstream, or the lunar and solar channel. If we are to summarize a million of practices of different kind of traditions, then they all lead to only two actions. First of all is to unite what is opposing each other, for example, the upstream and the downstream. Then the next step is to unite this energy with consciousness. If we look at this from a little bit another point of view, different point of view, without the use of Par-lung, then in the Tibetan tradition, these two actions, they have a very clear description, definition. First, to become aware of the light of the sun. The light of the sun I translate here as I understand it, as I hear it, literally quite. So it is the enlightenment on the level of the mind. And then the light of the sun unite with the light of the mother, which is the light of consciousness. But Padmasambhava said it very clear. He said that realization of Par-lung basically is a guarantee of realization. Because attention is drifting a lot, but realization of Par-lung definitely is something behind of any kind of possible manipulation from by us. It is beyond any reach that we are able to control. You cannot influence Par-lung, not with your breathing, not with your thoughts, not with your actions, with nothing. The only thing that you can do is to maintain a certain level of attention and observe the ongoing changes. In the beginning stage, Olga encountered a very concrete condition. Olga goes through the third step. People realize Par-lung and then they go home and they don't have enough attention to hold it constantly. So after some time it is lost, the awareness of it is gone. And we need to manifest it anew. Olga had an interesting talk once with Yu Mintan. It's a very famous man. He has many schools and pupils. In China he has an own institute. So Olga wasn't speaking with Yu Mintan himself. She was speaking as the director of this institute. And the Taoist teachers, they know very well about the importance of Par-lung, but they call it differently. And when Olga says, here Par-lung becomes manifested and then transformation begins, the director says to Olga, no, it's impossible. He says, in the physical body it cannot be manifested. It is only possible to manifest it in the afterlife, after the death of the physical body. But first of all, Olga tells her experience. And secondly, the problem is in the paradigm. So in their teaching, and not only in their teaching, in any kind of teaching of any tantric school, this is sort of a fact that human life is not enough to realize it. In the Tibet tradition, in a school, for example, Sakchen, founded by Nyingmapa, the paradigm is including this process, and they have practices that work. And a completely different question is that this process, it is a very concrete phenomenon, and no visualization will help here. In a human's belly, indeed, a very dense matter in the form of a sphere becomes manifested, and it is possible to feel it. And when Olga gives the third step, Olga gives transference. So Olga manifests Parlung on herself, and someone put a hand on Olga's belly and is able to receive this sensation. And when this one is doing the practice, and the same one is doing practice by himself or herself, he will have a very concrete understanding of what kind of result he has to achieve. He won't be mistaken, and because of it, Parlung will manifest itself completely. And Olga has some pupils who have this process strongly stabled within themselves. Olga is hoping to make a video with him so he can tell about his past in details. Why does Parlung has such a key important role? We have a central channel, Ida and Pingala channels, and what is called the orbit in Taoism. These are the main channels which take part in the manifestation of Parlung. And just the same way as an embryo is manifested in the mother's womb and then goes through the certain path in order to being born, just the same way Parlung is being manifested in the belly and has a certain path that it has to take, it has to mature. And when it matures, it takes the function of breathing on itself. And the whole construction, so to say, begins to breathe and being magnetized by other qualities. So basically, to put it very simple, it is kind of a magnet that on its path to being born magnetizes and changes the whole structure. Parlung is exactly the highest form of energy, the purest form of vibration. Logically, everything that lies below its structure becomes magnetized by this strong frequency. So here we are talking about the topics from Pranic Breathing, enlightenment and Breatharianism. Here we are talking about the etherical, mental, astral, about the unification of different levels of distortions, about the widening of the perception, or total opening of perception of everything that is there. From the belly on, it goes out and goes in the frontal part of the orbit, and then it goes, enters the perineum. Through the perineum it goes to the central channel, and in the central channel it becomes, so to say, the connection between Ida, Pingala and the central channel. Here this sentence that the balancing or the burning of the wind of karmas takes place is happening, because in our present construction these channels are not connected and a certain disbalance appears. And Olga repeats once again, it is a very concrete process. For example, Olga knows about some schools, and these schools, they heard this information, they received it from somewhere, found it somewhere, but they had no master who had this experience, and they distorted this perception into their own paradigm. They visualize the upstream and downstream going into the central channel and believe that this way it is united. And once Olga was speaking with a pupil from this school, and he said to Olga, I'm practicing and at least a little bit of energy is entering into my central channel, right? But this is a completely useless action. It's just like the sperm enters the womb, but there is no cell to be fertilized. no creation will take place. And next Palung continues to go through the central channel and clean all the levels and cleans the central channel and burn all the wind of karmas. And these processes are very pleasant, they are very soft. When it was happening with Olga, she was perceiving as the Palung was going layer by layer, so to say, higher up through her physical body, she perceived every layer in a different quality. So maybe sounds here, maybe on the next level it was the colors. For example, from the first to the second chakra, the body smelled like roses, and the next layer it smelled like a different flower. The way the body was perceived, it was completely different. Olga had the impression that she is a rainbow. So every parameter it had its own qualities, but all these different qualities, they still have been in one and the same spectrum, so to say, in one and the same structure. Olga didn't finish her own process, and she is doing this right now here. But from this point on, Olga can give information found in the original texts, in the original roots. In the original texts, in the roots of the teachings. When Palung is reaching the top of the head, it once again enters the orbit, and then it goes into the chest. And here Olga wants to tell about a certain practice. In all schools which are teaching realization of the body of light, there is a central practice which is called Guru Yoga of the white A. And this practice is the main one, and it is given as the first one. And the practice is very complicated, it needs detailed work, but the main idea behind this practice is that you have to imagine circling letter A in your chest. And at the same time you have to imagine that ascended masters are sending light streams or light beams with knowledge or with energy or whatever into your chest. From your chest out, these same streams begin to go out. So within you merge with all the five elements, all the beams of light that emits your body, they merge with rainbow colors. So you become the light. In one of Olga's open talks, Olga said already the example that on a certain island, the natives, they have been praying to a plane, to an artificial plane, thinking that this is real. But in general, what she wants to say is that a very certain concrete information has been distorted a lot. So when Palung comes to the chest, there is indeed a vortex created or manifested as well, and this vortex begin to suck in, pull in, so to say, the sphere. In her life, Olga met one who had this process happening. And when Palung is entering this vortex, it goes through a very fine, very small channel. This channel is called Chandala channel, and there is a practice that's called the practice of Chandala. It's a secret practice. And when Palung goes through this channel, it goes on the back out again and continues its path in the orbit. And then it goes up again to the back of the head, of the skull. That's why in the Taoist traditions there are no chakras, but there are three main points, and they are called dantians. The lowest dantian, the lower dantian, where Palung is told to be created. The second dantian is in the chest, where it is told to enter. And the third dantian is in the head, basically on the back. That's why it is very important that we have three pumps working. On the side of the back, the first pump is the sacrum. The second is between the shoulder blades. There in this area there is the exit of the Chandala channel. And the third, it is on the back of the skull. There is a very important process going on We have 4 channels going to our eyes in our skull. 2 channels are for the karmic vision, which we are using right now, and 2 channels with clear vision, which we are not using right now. So Parlung is dividing then in 2 parts and goes through the channel of this clear vision. And this way our perception frees itself from the perception bounded to forms, to ideas. And this is the final step of realization. So after this, the realization of the body of light is completed. When Olga's friend had his Parlung going through the chest, his physical breath stopped and he wasn't breathing for several days. And here his teeth began to regrow, and physical body began to regenerate. So what does Olga encounters in her work with people? Parlung moves just the same way as when the energy starts. Together with the energy, it moves into the problematic areas and begins to regenerate them, begins to balance them. So this means the process that Olga described right now, it is the general scheme. Olga encountered, for example, the situation when a practitioner had a problem with his lungs, and Parlung went out of the stomach many times, but then it went to the lungs. And this repeated itself until the lungs regenerated completely. If we are speaking here about the speed, Olga cannot tell anything because this is very individual. But Olga's experience of the diving into the light and her dissolution in the light, it wasn't connected with Parlung actually. It was simply the redirection of attention. That's why Padmasambhava said that the realization, the manifestation of Parlung, basically it's kind of a guarantee. This experience that Olga had, it was occasionally, and it happens very seldom. This step-by-step guide, it can complete the process. So Olga has the experience of her physical breath stopping. And this also wasn't connected with Parlung. And when her physical breath stopped, a strong transformation started as well. But then it was also a certain redirection of her attention. So what is Olga trying to explain here? In order to become aware or perceive our nature, redirection of attention is enough. And if we speak about the situations or practices that helps us to direct the attention in the right direction, of them can be many. In the universe there is no other time and space aside from here, and this now. And karma basically is an idea. So when Olga uses this term, this means that a person enters the state of centration in a natural way. This means when a person stops to identify himself with the work of the mind, with the appearing objects, thus have the enlightened person have a karma. There are cause and effect. So the connection between cause and effect, they still exist, but this doesn't mean that our attention has to be distracted by them. Similar to an example when we take a brush, take color, dip the brush into the color and then try to paint into the skies. It doesn't work. As long as we have the idea, the perception of a gap between ourselves and the nature, this personality that stays on the other side of this gap, that we identify ourselves with, it has a certain kind of story. But because we are not able to become aware of this whole story, because there is not one single closed system, in some way they have effect on us. We create very limited ideas, and every process that appears after this, we perceive from this point of view, from this perception. And at this moment, Olga returns back to the moment when she says it's all about the direction of attention. If attention dives into the work of the mind, then we perceive forms, time, and space, and these causalities. If attention becomes aware of the work of the mind, then the process begins to happen as Olga has described them. So the wind of karmas, they are our emotions, thoughts, actions, reactions. Do these processes stop to occur after our winds of karma are balanced? No, the processes will be happening just as they have been happening. But our perception and our relationship with these processes will be completely different. That's why on the first seminar of Pranic Breathing, this is a very important practice, centration. And on the third step of Pranic Breathing, Olga gives unification of the senses. Olga has a very good idea right now. I suggest to stop here. And in 1 month, when we have the next open talk, the people here, they have already results that they can share. And in 1 month we will ask the people to share their experience on the second step.